raised over $300 million. You just got valued at $2 billion. Two-time founder, first company you sold to Intuit.
When it comes to coming up with an idea for a business, you have to really come at it from a problem first standpoint and fall in love with a problem and then work your way to a solution from there. One, I didn't have any money. Two, I wasn't really super passionate about any particular idea. Pick a direction and just make progress. Don't get stuck in figuring out where the end of the maze is. It's just about making progress and iterating and learning more every day.
Is this really correct? Did you do 3 rounds in less than 1 year?
12 calendar months, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Because I was like, wow. How do you create that? Have people begging to give you money? Because if someone's investing large amounts of money 3 different times over 12 months, you're not asking for it.
You kind of have to will it into existence. At a certain point, the business has to speak for itself. Then without even trying to fundraise, people were knocking on our door to give us money.
Charles, welcome to the pod. Thank you for jumping on.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to jump right in. Two-time founder, first company you sold to Intuit. Within almost like a year or 2 of selling that, you started to think about your next company, Rain,
Yep.
and you just raised $2 billion. And you just got valued at $2 billion, and you raised over $300 million. Talk to us a little bit about how do you go from selling a company within a year to Intuit, and then a few years later starting another fintech company. How do you go through that idea maze? We're going to jump into things around fundraising as well.
Yeah. So I graduated Stanford 2012. And at that time, I knew I wanted to start something. But one, I didn't have any money. Two, I wasn't really super passionate about any particular idea. So I started working at Microsoft. I took a job as a product manager, moved to Seattle with 2 goals, really. One is to save up enough so that I would be able to bootstrap a business at some point. And then 2 is start getting more of those soft skills of product building. Like I had a experience of engineering, I had a CS background. I did a lot of software development internships, but I didn't really have that experience on the soft side of shipping products. So I thought PM experience would help. But really, nights and weekends, I was working on ideas and eventually got to the point at Microsoft. I had a number. I was like, if I save 50K, I could squeeze that and survive off of that for a year and get an idea off the ground. And at Microsoft, working nights and weekends, you just kind of burn yourself out, making a little bit of progress at a time. So it got to a point where I had saved enough. I just decided I needed to quit, or I would end up being in Microsoft for like 30 years. Left, and then started working with some friends of mine, and we got really early traction on this one idea around the contractor management space. Intuit came knocking earlier than we were expecting, but the alignment and vision was there. And to me, it was an opportunity to have a single in the belt to kind of set myself up so that future startups, I would be able to take a bigger swing and also be able to grow up inside of a larger organization and learn how do I ship products and lead teams. And that really was my opportunity at Intuit, was kind of just training ground for me. I was able to.
And how many years were you at Intuit again?
I was there for 4.5 years.
Oh, so you got the full vest.
Yeah.
Even more.
Well, there was actually a 3-year vest. So I stayed longer than I had to, just because I felt like I was still learning. I really enjoyed the people I was working with. I was in an emerging space that I was excited about. But it was training ground for me on shipping products, on working with engineering teams. And then I got to a point where I felt like the learning had started to plateau. I had also recovered enough from the first startup that I had forgotten of the trauma of what it is to start a business, and was getting foolish again and getting that itch again to eventually start something. So I left Intuit in the middle of 2019, and then took a sabbatical to travel, refresh, and then started the idea journey again. And with the ambitions of eventually building something larger than the first time.
How do you think about the idea maze?
Yeah.
Like, what is a part of the idea maze? And then, since you sold your first business to like a Fortune 100 company, if you will, I assume you wanted to go pretty big. So how do you understand if an idea can be that big during the idea maze?
I don't think that's super as important. One, I'm a technologist, so I love technology. I love playing around with new things. But when it comes to coming up with an idea for a business, you have to really come at it from a problem first standpoint and fall in love with a problem and then work your way to a solution from there. So when I was going through this idea maze, I couldn't really I had all this experience into it in small business space, and that was the first area I started looking around, was the small business space. And I didn't really want to come with it as like a problem first standpoint of like, I worked in HR tooling, I worked in finance. That is a solution to all the problems I see. Because if you're walking around with a hammer, everything is going to look like a nail to you. And it's important in the beginning to just pick a direction. Like if you're going through the idea maze, pick a direction and just make progress. Don't get stuck in figuring out where the end of the maze is. It's just about making progress and iterating and learning more every day. So I picked a direction. I started working on a bunch of different things, and the world changed a lot while I was going through that idea maze. I started in 2020 before COVID, and then COVID kind of changed a lot of the ideas that I was looking at. I started looking more into brick and mortar space. I started looking more into micro SaaS products, and I started looking more at like creators. And so what I looked at changed a lot because of the world around me changed. And then through that, I probably worked on 5 different product ideas. Eventually landed, found a co-founder who I didn't even know was going to be my co-founder. It was just someone that I connected with on a few ideas through the On Deck Founder Fellowship. We started working on this one project, and I really saw that as a opportunity to build a micro SaaS tool. Because I was looking at micro SaaS creators, I thought, hey, even before LLMs really reached where it is right now, just the cost of building software was going down with no-code tools, with higher level abstractions. It was getting easier and easier to build a SaaS product, build a software business. So I wanted to learn what it was like to build one. And my co-founder, Farouk, had this idea. He had this domain that he's been holding on for a while called SignAndWire.com. I just decided, hey, let's spend a few months, build this, get it out into the world, have people try it and just see where it goes. It wasn't really meant to be a venture scale business. We weren't trying to raise money for it. We just wanted to work together and build something. And through building that, we learned about a whole new set of problems that eventually turned into what Rain is today.
What was the biggest problem or the biggest aha moment during that idea maze, specifically with SignAndWire?
Yeah. The initial premise, at least, of SignAndWire is pretty simple. We felt that it should be really easy to fundraise. If you're a new founder, you have to figure out, how do I generate all these legal documents? How do I raise money for investor? And then you have to cobble together all these different tools. And then your investor experience is really bad. Like we've been both angel investors and founders. So we were at both sides of the table and knew that it was kind of a broken experience. You go to DocuSign to sign the links, and then you have to figure out how you're actually going to wire the money. So it was a simple concept of how do we combine both those things into one product, generate all of the legal documents that a startup needs, have one link the investor can go to, and sign the documents, wire the money. But that wire piece ended up being a lot more complicated than we expected. It was not as simple as we thought to just move money between one trusted party and another. And then that insight into just how broken the traditional financial rails were is what actually led us to what became Rain.
Right. And then we were talking about this behind the scenes, that the newest iteration of Rain was really in 2021,
end of 2021. So we had shipped SignAndWire to like a small beta group of customers. They really liked the experience, but they were frustrated with how slow ACH was. So we weren't actually even using Wire. We were using ACH because Wire was difficult to get access to. You'd have to sign a very large contract with a bank and you get all these money movement rails. So we decided, let's just do ACH. Let's do it through an intermediary, which added a lot of time to the process because you'd have to one hop between the intermediary to the startup founder who's actually raising money. And then through that, we're like, oh, this is really broken experience. This is 2021. There should be better rails out there, better ways to move money. And earlier on in the idea maze, I had actually spent some cycles on contractor payments because at Intuit, I had focused a lot of time on self-employed space, building tools for contractors. So when I was going through the idea maze, that customer segment was really interesting to me. Contractor payments, especially internationally, was very broken. And then I had learned about stablecoins and thought that actually stablecoins for contractor payments made a lot of sense. You can pay people anywhere in the world. It's very cheap. And then people wanted to hold dollars. So contractor payments made a lot of sense. I didn't really figure out the good on-ramping experience, so I didn't pursue that idea at that time. But then we kind of faced a similar challenge in this ACH wiring dilemma. And both Farouk and I had also, this was 2021, Web3 was kind of starting to take off. DeFi was getting really big, and we were independently exploring that space. We thought about stablecoins again. It was actually like fundraising is another great use case. Two trusted intermediaries wanting to send large sums of money, maybe in different countries. You don't want to worry about like fat fingering a routing number or an account number. You don't want to worry about your bank kind of blocking the transaction. So stablecoins were a great way to actually invest in startups. So we added USDC into SignAndWire, and through that, the next step was like, hey, we actually had an investor invest in Rain through SignAndWire in USDC, and it was on Christmas Day when banks would have traditionally been closed. So that was like one big aha moment of like, this is 100x better experience.
24/7.
24/7. He was in Singapore. He sent us funds Christmas Day, and we were able to get it. And then we were able to start using it to grow our business. But the issue was it wasn't actually that easy to use it. No one was accepting USDC. We couldn't go to Apple to buy the laptop that we wanted and have them accept USDC. We couldn't go to Delta and buy the ticket to the conference we wanted to go to. So it became really clear very quickly on as we were trying to build on top of stablecoins that a really big missing ingredient was that interoperability, was the acceptance layer. And if we can get stablecoins and cards to actually function together, that would unlock a lot of adoption. So that was one of the core insights is, hey, if we solve this problem, it would really increase the adoption of stablecoins and would be a very valuable thing to solve.
And this is a global problem. This is not just a U.S. problem. This is a global problem. Obviously, you have someone sending you information or sending you money from Singapore. Why had no one been able to do that before? And then what was the way, I assume you're like almost going through the idea maze again of like, how do we choose the right way to work with someone who has these payment rails already, and maybe we can put USDC over those payment rails? Like, how did that process go?
Yeah, I think people have tried to do it before, and there's ways to do it. It's just very convoluted, or there was no real one place you can go and get coverage for every single country or many countries. Like if you knew all your investors were going to be in Singapore, it would be easy to solve that problem. It'd be difficult to solve, hey, one investor's in Singapore, the other one's in Mexico, the third one is in Brazil, someone's in Korea. Then you're like, okay, then you're piecing together 5 different payment providers and 5 different rails to solve this problem. Or everyone has to go through ACH and everyone has to have a US bank account. So there were ways to solve it. It just was either very expensive or it would take you a lot of time to cobble together a bunch of different solutions.
Love that. Now, I wanted to also talk about yours. I didn't know Farouk was also a second-time founder too.
Yeah.
So what was the advantages of being a second-time founder, and then what were the traps of like that you tried to avoid? You might have talked to some of your peers, and some of your investors might have been like, hey, like just watch out for this. When they found a company a second time, they like spend too much money. They hire people too fast. They do this, they do that. I'm curious what were the pros and the cons.
The biggest thing to me is really the psychological aspects of starting something. If you've done it before, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. I think a lot of first-time founders, they don't really know. They think it's going to be another job of like, hey, I'm going to show up to work. Investors are going to tell me, here's the metrics you need to hit. Here's like the product you should ship.
And I just hit them.
Yeah, I just have to execute, and then I get a Series A, and then I'm going to get new sets of metrics that I have to hit. And then like it's very clear how my process is going to be. Things are going to be up and to the right. If they're not up and to the right, then I just quit and go back and find a job at like a big tech company. And startups are not like that, right? You have to set your own goals. You have to decide on yourself what you need to do to move the business forward. There's going to be ups and downs. It's not always going to be up and to the right. It's going to be up and down and to the left and sideways, and it's going to go in every direction. So you can never let yourself get too high or too low in founding something. If you've done it before, you kind of know that's part of the game. And if you're willing to play the game again, then you're playing the game again with that assumption. So I think that's like the biggest thing that founding something again taught me and prepared me for, was just that emotional roller coaster, that insecurity that you're going to face, that unsureness of what to do. And just let me roll with the punches a lot easier. the downfalls, I think, of founding something again is that you know all of the bad things that are going to happen. And you almost are scared to repeat the mistakes that you made.
Open up old wounds.
Yeah. You're scared. Like if you started a consumer company and it was really hard to get traction or the distribution was difficult, then even though you're probably one of the best people to start that again because you learned so much, you don't want to do that again because it was really hard and you have
like
all
a
these
cold plunge. You're like, I know how cold plunge is. I know how good it is for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to go in.
And they're like, actually, like my friends who did B2B, it seemed like they had an easier time. And then you go to B2B, but you have no idea how to sell into enterprises, or you have no idea how to build for businesses. So I think that's a big trap, is almost over learning on the things that happened the first time and trying to avoid not just mistakes, but just avoid a lot of the hard things that you had to face. Because starting a startup is about going through hard things. It's about running through walls. It's about chewing glass for a long time. So you shouldn't be trying to avoid those moments. It's like, how do you do those with, like, first time I founded, I was just brute forcing a lot of stuff. I was working a lot of hours. I wasn't necessarily working smart. Now I can work a little bit smarter. I still have to go through the same walls, but I'm much more intentional about how I'm going through the walls.
Strategic.
Yeah, exactly.
And that leads me to my next question. I want to talk about something that we've seen with a lot of second-time founders. We did 6 investments into second-time founders in 2025. And I think most of them are focused on distribution.
Yeah.
The second time around, instead of brute forcing and trying to be that number one salesperson, they're focused on distribution. And that brings me to the question around your opportunity in partnership with Visa, becoming a principal member, leveraging their distribution. And you've did that in like a pretty fast time. So I'm curious, like, what made the decision to work with Visa? How big of an unlock was that? And how much glass did you chew through that situation?
Yeah, it was pretty instrumental. And I would say one of the filters as I'm going through the idea maze and deciding what idea is worth pursuing further, especially as you start validating different ideas, is really like, what is the distribution? Like, how are you gonna, what's your unique advantage of getting this out into the world versus everyone else? Or at least do you have a strategy? And when we thought about stablecoins, being able to leverage existing distribution that Visa has spent decades building, merchant acceptance, that was one of the key unlocks. Is, hey, we think stablecoins are great. They're 100x better improvement on the way money moves, but distribution is a challenge. Getting merchants to accept stablecoins is going to be a challenge. It will take decades to get the level of acceptance that Visa has. Visa's done the hard work. They've solved the distribution problem. It makes sense to partner with Visa, work as a Visa principal member to unlock it. Being a principal member wasn't necessarily the goal day one. Day one was, hey, we just need to issue cards. How do we do that? And we talked to a lot of different people, because Farouk and I don't come from card backgrounds. We've never issued a card before we started Rain. So we just talked to everyone. We talked to issuers, we talked to banks, we talked to networks, we talked to fintechs, just to figure out what the right combination of these different elements would get us what we needed to do. And the right solution changed over time. We optimize for getting something out quickly, and then we optimize for what the right thing was long term. So the getting something out quickly wasn't necessarily the thing that we are built on today, and that was intentional. It's, hey, we need to prove a few things out. Once you prove those things out, you can make the investment into what the right long term setup is going to be like. And that setup, getting the principal membership, that was a multi-year long process. It was a lot of chewing glass, but it was important to get.
And then let's talk about like being the world's first 365, 24/7. You talked a little bit about that with SignAndWire. How do you convince, after multiple years of working to become a principal member, how do you convince Visa that not only should we be a principal member, we should be the member to create this like 365, 24/7 opportunity with?
Yeah, Visa was pretty early on in doing stablecoin settlement. So they had done stablecoin settlement before Rain. I
remember Kai was like super deep.
Yeah, Kai's been great in leading the charge of crypto adoption inside Visa and actually building product to support that. They were early on in stablecoin settlement, but they had 2 main problems. One, they weren't doing a lot of volume. 2, it wasn't really a differentiated experience. There was no benefit to doing stablecoin settlement, really, in terms of compared to a fiat settlement flow. For us, like we built the infrastructure at Rain to be fully on chain. So all of our collateral for all the programs sits on chain. All the spending is based off of that collateral. So for us, it was a really huge advantage to be able to do stablecoin settlement. And since we're a principal member, a non-bank principal member, we had very minimal fiat dependencies, very minimal dependencies on the existing banking infrastructure. So for us to be able to settle with Visa directly in stablecoins was a huge unlock. That means that we can cut out all of the banking dependencies from the flow of funds. We can cut out all the fiat dependencies. It made us a lot more efficient.
Wow.
It made cost of capital go down. And then once we did that, the next stage was like, how do we do this 7 days a week? Because traditionally, you can only settle, even with stablecoin settlement, you were only limited to settling during banking hours. And what that meant, at least in the US and a few other places, that as an issuer, we have to hold collateral with Visa, which is just money in a bank account just sitting there to cover weekend risk, to cover long holiday risk, because we weren't going to settle Saturday and Sunday. We weren't going to settle on Christmas Day. We weren't going to settle on New Year's. With 7-day-a-week settlement, we're settling all those days. So the risk that Visa has with an issuer like us is really 1 day of settlement. So the actual exposure to Rain risk is a lot less. They're more comfortable reducing the collateral requirements, which means that the cost of running a program through Rain is a lot less than a traditional program where there's traditional collateral requirements.
Wow.
So that was actually a very big unlock into how we ran our business, the economics of it, and the efficiency that we're able to operate at.
Wow. And this podcast is brought to you by Gunderson Detmer. For over 30 years, Gunderson Detmer has represented what's next. Built exclusively for the innovation economy, the firm is the #1 law firm in venture capital globally, partnering with leading investors and groundbreaking companies from start to scale. Learn more at gunder.com. I want to talk about stablecoins in general. Maybe you can, just in case some people don't know what stablecoins are, you can talk a little bit about that. And then the second part is that like 1% of all, I guess, like payments are on stablecoins now. What happens as that grows to be 5, 10, maybe even many more people putting all of their payments through stablecoins?
So I have been interested in crypto probably since 2013. Got excited about Bitcoin, got excited about Ethereum and was mining Ethereum early on. But I felt like I'm more passionate about building on the application side, like building for like more concrete use cases. And I always felt like it was too early. There's just so much infrastructure to be built. But when I first learned about stablecoins, it was like I like fell in love with them. You get all the advantages of building on the blockchain. So you have money, you're able to move value at the speed of the internet, which you're accustomed to for everything else. You're accustomed to consuming content at the speed of the internet, to communicating with people at the speed of the internet. But for some reason, like moving value was still left in the mainframe era. So the crypto was great, but then no one wanted to spend their Bitcoin. No one wanted to spend their Ethereum for different reasons. One, they saw those as speculative assets. They wanted to hold them for the long haul. They thought they were going to appreciate over time. Two, it was very volatile. Like you never knew what the price of coffee was going to be because every day it would change, every second it would change. So those two things made it not a great asset to actually spend. Stablecoins gives you the best of both worlds. You have this token that lives on a blockchain, so it can move at the speed of the internet, but it is pegged to the dollar. There's different ways of pegging it to the dollar. Most of the volume in stablecoins right now is dollar-backed stablecoins where there are cash or cash-like equivalents at banks that is backing the on-chain token. So you get the stability of the US dollar or of a fiat currency, but you get the benefits of a cryptocurrency. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. That's what a stablecoin is. The 1% is basically the M2 money supply. 1% of that is represented in stablecoins, which is
already large.
Which is already large, but just shows you how much more there is to grow. 100x growth. If you think that the future is tokenized money, which I strongly believe, whether that's stablecoins, whether that's CBDCs, whether that's digital like deposit tokens, if you think that money is going to go on chain and become tokenized and move at the speed of the internet, then you think that 1% is eventually going to be 100. So there is, I think, that, and we don't know what the timeline is at in the next 5 years, is that the next 10, 20, who knows? I just know that next year is probably going to be larger than one. And the year after that is going to be larger than that. And that's exciting to be building that space.
Yeah, and you assume if folks are being able to move money at the speed of the internet, they'll spend more of it. So not only are you like increasing your percentage of M2 money supply, you're increasing the like money supply overall.
Yeah, I mean, you're increasing the velocity of money, right? Money's moving faster. It's changing hands quicker. You need to have less float. You need to have less liquidity in certain places because you don't have to pretend like money is instant. It is. Money can get there right away. You don't have to pre-fund an account to make it seem like it's going to get there right away.
The only other thing about the stable coins or crypto in general is like there is some credibility that needs to be built back, because in the past there's just been a lot of speculation, as you mentioned before. So I'm curious of how have you thought about, or even selling to folks to understand a little bit more about the credibility of crypto, specifically stable coins, and what's that conversation been like?
It's gotten easier over time, especially with more regulation, more regulatory clarity, like Genius Act. You have MiCA in Europe. Governments are seeing the benefit of stablecoins, especially, and they're carving it out from the rest of cryptocurrencies. Like blockchain is a technology; it's an infrastructure. You can create many different types of assets on top of it. Some of them are securities, some of them are not, and you should treat them separately. And stablecoins are now getting proper regulatory treatment in different governments, and that's making conversations with enterprises a lot easier because they're seeing the rules of the road be very clear. They're seeing guidelines being put in as like, what is a regulated stablecoin? What do the asset backing it have to look like, and where does it have to sit, and what do the audit reports have to be, and what's the transparency expected? With all of those things starting to be formalized, people are getting more comfortable with it. And then as they see more legitimate use cases of stablecoins, it's outgrowing that degen.
Those are the days, man.
The degen stereotypes of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. I think every new technology, like the internet, early on, there are a lot of things where people, the internet is really shady. Like you don't know who you're talking to. Like you wouldn't be able to conduct real business on it. Like e-commerce is never going to happen online. Like how can you share your credit card details on a website? Then now, how much of commerce happens online? So even though like beginning technology maybe is used for bad purposes, we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's about how do you create the right controls, safeguards to use the technology in the proper ways, because there are a lot of valuable use cases that you unlock with new technology.
I think that makes sense. I also want to hit on fundraising.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm not sure, is this really correct? Did you do 3 rounds in less than 1 year?
12 calendar months. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was like, wow. So just talk to us a little bit. What type of momentum, product velocity, problem solving velocity, which leads into revenue velocity momentum. How do you create that to be able to convince or almost like have people begging to give you money? Because if someone's investing large amounts of money 3 different times over 12 months, you're not asking for it, most likely. So I'm curious to like, what's the ethos of that? And then maybe even talk about fundraising in general, like maybe some tips and some thoughts and maybe even some mistakes you might have made in the process.
Yeah, you kind of have to will it into existence. So we raised our seed round in 2022. We raised an extension at the end of that year, which was well-timed because that was right before FTX happened. And then 2023 was a really difficult year for fundraising in general, especially for crypto. 2024 was starting to thaw a little bit, but it was still pretty tough. And then we actually went out to market in 2024, maybe a little bit prematurely, but we felt like we had the product velocity. We had signs of the revenue growth as well, but it was still very early. And I think that was just too early for a lot of investors to fully appreciate what we had built and the opportunity. So we just had to make tough choices and say, hey, we're going to have to spend the next 6 months and just grind out, prove with a smaller team that we probably planned to, that this is going to work. And then once we were able to prove that, then without even trying to fundraise, people were knocking on our door to give us money. So it was really just willing the revenue velocity into existence that enabled the fundraising to happen.
What do you think was the most interesting part from the investor lens? Like, were they already looking for things in stablecoins? Were they looking just for amazing teams in the fintech space? I'm curious what you think if you were in their seat. What do you think that they were looking at?
I think there was a few things. One was there was a few things that happened in terms of, regulation changed. So with Genius, I think people were more excited about stablecoin opportunity. Two is there was starting to be obviously more adoption in the space, hearing of different use cases of stablecoins, things that got investors before to see how actually this is a real thing that's solving real problems. It's not just this hypothetical thing that Charles is telling me about that could happen one day. It's actually driving real volume. And then three is just the revenue numbers. You saw the business growth and it speaks for itself. Like, I don't think Farouk and I are particularly great fundraisers. It's like you let the business, at a certain point, the business has to speak for itself. No amount of storytelling, no amount of PowerPoint wizardry is gonna help.
Let's talk a little bit about the culture.
Yeah.
So you have this culture around, you call it rainmakers internally.
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about acquisitions and stuff too, but I first want to hit on culture. How do you build a culture where, like, we ran into each other in Soho a few weeks back. You're like, hey, like, we're growing from X number and we're doubling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we just doubled in terms of team size or what have you. So I'm curious if, like, how do you keep that culture as you are scaling that fast? And then what's even behind, like, the jargon of Rainmaker?
Yeah, last 12 months, we've seen a lot of growth on the team. So we historically have kept the team very lean. We were less than 20 people 12 months ago. We're now over 120 people. So yeah, 10. Good growth. Yeah. A lot of growth in the last 12 months. But we've been able to keep a lot of the cultural elements that we cared about intact, and as well as add new ones that you need as you scale. Because whatever worked in the past is not necessarily going to work in the future. So certain things you have to change. So the goal is not necessarily keep the culture exactly the same. It's evolve it in a way that makes sense for where the business is at currently. And I think we've done that pretty successfully. Then the biggest reason that we've been able to do that is really around hiring. It's you can do all this work about codifying all your values and writing them out and making sure everyone listens. But if you're not hiring people that inherently are going to live those values, you're making your life a lot more difficult. And I think we've done a good job of hiring people that live those values without doing the good job of actually codifying it.
What are those values? And, like, you don't have to go too deep, but, like, what is that?
I'm actually spending a lot of time refreshing.
What's that hiring
now.
process?
But one big thing that we screen for is autonomous, like people that can go and we will trust to deliver a big feature without a lot of handholding. The team is really flat. I have 25 direct reports. And there's only...
You about to be Jensen?
Yeah, I
Jensen has 60 plus.
Yeah, reports. I am inspired by Jensen and people like that. And at Intuit, I was the team that I was a part of was also very flat, so I was inspired by that as well. Really around how do we reduce the amount of people that aren't actually doing the thing that we need done? How do we reduce the amount of bureaucracy and middle management? So we've kept the team really flat. There's only like a few levels of hierarchy. And we want to maintain it relatively flat for the size of the company. But you can only do that if you're hiring people that you trust that can be autonomous, because I don't have the time or the bandwidth to
teach, handhold.
Yeah. And also to, like, micromanage everyone. I can't really tell people, hey, here's the 5 things I expect for you this week. Here's a task. Here's a linear ticket. It's like, hey, we need to ship this feature. We need to solve this problem. Go figure it out. And if you're hiring people that want to do that and thrive in that environment, it makes it a lot easier to scale that. So that's a big thing, making sure that people are low ego. And then are not trying to empire build and not trying to...
Fiefdoms.
Yeah, not trying to build fiefdoms, not worrying about their toes getting stepped on, just wanting to get things done, take pride in the team that they're building, the product that they're building. I think that's, like, super important. We have a high bias towards action versus just talking about things. We have that. We're very humble, but also we want to win. That's super important. Is like that playing to win, the willingness to do what it takes to win, and being able to cut out everything else that's not going to help us win.
Yeah. And thanks for coming on the Winners Welcome podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. The analogies for sports, even in the vlog that I'm doing, like a lot of people really love the analogies of sport.
Yeah.
One analogy that I had was around Steph Curry. I said, Steph Curry has missed more threes than anyone in the history of basketball.
Yes.
Missed, failed, which is probably the reason why he has made the most threes, is the best shooter of all time. It's because he was able to like go through that process, chew glass, etc., to be able to get to that place. The last two things I want to hit on is just around your acquisition strategy. And I'm just curious of how you guys are using AI internally too. Like that wasn't in questions, but I'm assuming if you're going to keep things super flat, 25 direct reports going up to 50, if you will, AI is going to be really big. So I'm curious if how you guys have started doing a few acquisitions, and then would love to roll into how you're thinking about AI.
On the acquisition side, we've done 3 so far. They've been on the smaller side, but they've been teams that we've known for a while, that we admired, that we felt like were culturally aligned in the ways that I talked about. And then they were building products that were complementary to what we were building, and a lot of them were opportunistic. Like there's an opportunity to bring on this team that we admire, working on something that is complementary to what we're building, that we feel like could be inserted into Rain in a very seamless way. Those were no-brainer acquisitions to us. It like saves us probably 6 months of trying to hire a team, getting people up to speed. And then even if you do that, there's like this barrels versus bullets analogy. And a business is kind of constrained on the number of barrels they have. Even if you have a lot of ammunition, if you don't have barrels to actually shoot the ammunition, you can't move as fast. So these acquisitions are ways to get more barrels. There's now these founders that work at Rain that operate with that founder mentality that allow us to move in a faster way and do more things at once. So those have been like great acquisitions for us. We're talking to a few other companies that will fit that kind of mold. But we're also expanding into licensing and other areas besides that kind of traditional type of acquisition that we've done.
That makes sense. And then, let's talk about AI. I'm curious of like, what's your expectations of people who are working at a company, their use of AI? I know code makes sense, but I'm curious of like what people are doing out of code, outside of just like coding IDEs. And are folks who are not technical, what are they expected to do? Recently, internally, literally this week, we've been building our own intelligence layer at Harvard Capital, where every single thing that we do will be in some type of closed loop system. We can query things, we can do this, we can do that. We're even, Mitchell from Lava.
Yeah. I was listening to that. Great episode.
You got his new stuff that he's doing is insane because it's basically built inside of Claude now to be able to like call on all these different APIs. So I'm curious what's the expectations? What are some of the like wow moments that you've had around AI internally at the company?
We're definitely big proponents of AI usage, using it in every single aspect of the business. But I'm not a fan of setting adoption-based or usage-based metrics on AI. AI is a tool, and I don't think you should be prescriptive of what tool your team is using. It's, hey, we're going to set goals. We're going to set very aggressive goals that may not be achievable without the use of AI. But I don't care if you're chiseling with a hammer to like write this report. I don't care what tool you're using. It's like, if you get this done, I'm going to judge you on the outputs, not on the inputs. We think that AI is going to transform a lot of people's work, and everyone should be using AI. We're going to give people whatever budget they want to use AI. We're going to make sure the data is in the places that you need to use AI. You're going to have the right controls and tools in place. But I'm not going to judge you on how many tokens you use or what percentage of your team.
You're not token maxing.
Yeah.
I need you to get
I'm not going to judge you on how many LLMs you're using every day. It's like, hey, are you doing the work that we expect you to do? And I think AI allows us to set even more aggressive goals that wouldn't be possible before. It allows us to hire fewer people. Those are the things that matter to the business. And that's how we're viewing AI usage.
Last full question is, New York is coming back with fintech.
Yeah.
You guys are one of the proponents of that. Obviously, we have other big companies. We won't name them right now. But I'm curious I know you're from New York, so you can share that part. But Why New York fintech, and what do you think is the best part about it?
Well, I'm a Brooklyn kid, so I'm definitely biased. I spent over 10 years in the West Coast, a lot of time in the Bay Area, went to Stanford, worked at Intuit. Yeah, I think the Bay Area is still the top place for tech broadly. I think for AI, it's definitely in the lead. I think there's a few disadvantages to the Bay Area. One is there is still like this monoculture where it's kind of become a lot of groupthink in the Bay Area, which if you're building for the rest of the world, if you're building for people that are not in that monoculture, I think you're actually at a disadvantage. So AI is great because your customers are a lot of time are in the Bay Area. They're part of that monoculture. You can iterate very quickly. I think for something like what we're building, where we're servicing people across the whole globe, being at the center of finance, being where Wall Street is, being where people from all around the world coexist, is a beneficial. We're able to attract top talent. We're able to meet our customers, whether it's a bank or it's a Fortune 500 company, for lunch. We're able to host events with them. And then now there's this ecosystem. We're in the third wave of New York-based startups. There's a strong ecosystem of people who've done it before. They've been CFO somewhere. They've led growth somewhere. They've invested in this company that eventually IPO'd. So there is enough of that here to build a successful business. You're not making as much of a trade-off in starting in New York as you maybe were 15 years ago.
Love that. Well, Harlem Capital is pro New York as well. Charles, I appreciate you for coming on the podcast. It's been such a great conversation.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.